Christmas Eve, I sat alone in a freezing house waiting for my 10 daughters to return for dinner. Instead of a doorbell, I received a text from my eldest. "We have no obligation to compensate for your loneliness." I had devoted my life to raising them, yet only 2 years after my wife's death, they chose luxury parties over their aging father. The pain was sharp, but it awakened me. I realized I had confused sacrifice with enabling. The next morning, I executed a long, prepared plan. 76 missed calls followed. Thousands of pleas. I answered none. It was time for them to understand who truly held the power of choice. Welcome, everyone. Before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to know. A quick disclaimer, this story blends fictional elements for educational and entertainment purposes. Any overlap with actual names or locations is purely by chance, but the insight it offers is something you can take with you. I stood in the kitchen doorway, hands resting on the frame. The dining room table stretched before me, 10 white plates arranged in a perfect circle. Each one waited empty and patient, under the soft glow of Christmas lights I'd strung up 3 days ago. The turkey sat in the center, golden and gleaming skin, crackling just the way Martha used to like it. Mashed potatoes steamed in the serving bowl. Cranberry sauce caught the light deep red and glossy. The apple pie cooled on the counter behind me, filling the house with cinnamon and memory. Everything was ready. Everything except the people who were supposed to be here. The clock on the wall ticked. That was the only sound. No laughter, no footsteps on the porch, no car doors slamming in the driveway, just the steady mechanical rhythm of time passing second by second in a house that felt too big and too quiet. I'd set the table at 3 that afternoon. 10 plates, 10 forks, 10 knives, 10 napkins folded the way Martha taught me, crisp triangles that looked almost elegant. I'd even put out the good glasses, the crystal ones we only used for special occasions. This was supposed to be special. This was supposed to be the first Christmas in 3 years where all 10 of my daughters came home. But the driveway stayed empty. The porch stayed dark. And my phone, sitting face up on the counter, stayed silent. I walked to the table and adjusted one of the forks. It didn't need adjusting. I just needed something to do with my hands. Something to keep me from checking my phone again. I'd already checked it 17 times in the past hour. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. Snow had started falling an hour ago, light flurries that danced in the streetlight glow. Now it was coming down, heavier, thick flakes that stuck to the driveway and the bare branches of the oak tree in the front yard. The weather forecast had called for it. Winter storm moving in. Travel not recommended after 6. It was almost 6 now. I turned back to the table. 10 plates. 10 empty chairs. I could picture them all sitting there the way they used to when they were younger. Margaret at the head, bossy even as a child. Elizabeth beside her, always the peacemaker. Rebecca quiet and thoughtful. Rachel, the baby, laughing at something one of her sisters said. They'd filled this house once, filled it with noise and chaos and life. Now the house was just mine. Mine and the silence. It had been 3 years since Martha died. 3 years since that last Christmas, when she sat on the couch in a blanket that swallowed her whole, too weak to help with dinner, but too stubborn to stay in bed. The girls had been here that year, all 10 of them. They'd flown in from across the country, crowded into this house, cooked and laughed and cried, and held their mother's hand. I remembered the moment she pulled me aside late that night after the girls had gone to bed. She'd asked me to sit with her by the tree. The lights had been the only thing illuminating her face, casting shadows under her eyes. She'd taken my hand. Her fingers were cold, thin, fragile as bird bones. But her grip was strong. "George," she'd said, "promise me something." I'd nodded. I would have promised her anything. "If they forget you after I'm gone." She'd continued, her eyes locked on mine. Don't let them take you for granted. I'd started to protest. They won't forget. They're our daughters. She'd smiled at that. A sad, small smile that didn't reach her eyes. I hope you're right. But if I'm not, she'd squeezed my hand. You'll know what to do. I hadn't understood what she meant. Not then. But I was starting to now. The furnace kicked on. Or tried to. I heard the familiar hum, the click of the ignition, and then nothing. The hum died. The house stayed cold. I walked over to the thermostat in the hallway. The little screen blinked red. Error. I pressed the reset button. Waited. Nothing. The temperature reading dropped another degree. 63, 62. I went down to the basement. The furnace sat in the corner, old and reliable for 30 years until tonight. I checked the pilot light. Out. I tried to relight it. The spark clicked, caught, died. Clicked again, nothing. Outside, the wind howled louder. I climbed back upstairs. The kitchen felt colder than it had 10 minutes ago. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my chest. The turkey was starting to lose its shine. The mashed potatoes weren't steaming anymore. The cranberry sauce sat there perfect and untouched like a prop in a play no one was watching. I walked to the window and looked out at the snow. It was coming down in sheets, now thick and fast, erasing the driveway, the yard, the road beyond. The streetlights glowed orange through the white curtain. My phone buzzed. I spun around, hope flaring in my chest. But it wasn't a call. Just a weather alert. Winter storm warning in effect until midnight. Avoid travel. Stay indoors. I set the phone back down. The screen went dark. I thought about calling them. Margaret, Elizabeth, any of them. Just to check in. Just to see if they were coming. But I didn't. Because I already knew the answer. If they were coming, they'd be here by now. I'd heard plenty of excuses over the past 3 years. Work, traffic, kids, plans. Always something. Always a reason why they couldn't make it for Sunday dinner or my birthday, or just a phone call that lasted longer than 5 minutes. I'd told myself it was fine. They were adults. They had lives. But this was Christmas. This was the one day I'd ask. I walked back to the table. 10 plates, 10 empty chairs. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down. The wood creaked under my weight. The house settled around me, groaning in the cold. The clock ticked. The wind howled. The snow fell. And somewhere deep in the back of my mind, I heard Martha's voice. Soft. Certain. You'll know what to do. I looked at the 10 plates. The cold food. The silent phone. The house grew colder. And I realized with a clarity that felt almost physical that Martha had been right all along. I sat on the couch with my phone in my lap, watching the screen like it might suddenly come alive. The living room felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with every minute that passed. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the silence stretched. My fingers were numb. Not from the cold, though the house was losing heat fast without the furnace. It was the kind of numbness that comes from holding still too long, from waiting for something you already know isn't coming. The phone buzzed. Finally, I picked it up so fast I almost dropped it. Rachel, my youngest. 25, still calling me every Sunday to ask how to cook a roast or fix a leaky faucet. I swiped the message open. Dad, I'm so sorry. Got stuck at work. Boss needs me to cover tonight. Rain check, rain check. Like Christmas was a coffee date we could reschedule. It's okay, sweetheart, be safe. I set the phone down. Then it lit up again. Elizabeth. 38. The responsible one. David's parents are hosting. Can't skip it. Maybe next week. Next week. As if Christmas happened twice. The phone buzzed again. Jennifer. Steven's sick. Gotta stay home with him. Sorry, Dad. then Patricia. Kevin's family emergency. Talk soon. The messages kept coming, one after another. Each one a variation of the same excuse. Catherine. Snowed in at a friend's place. Roads are bad. I looked out the window. The roads were bad, but not impossible. Not if you really wanted to get somewhere. Amanda. Brian booked a surprise trip. Already at the airport. Nicole. Double shift at the hospital. You understand, right? Stephanie. Kids are sick. Can't risk spreading it. The phone rang. Actual ringing this time. I answered before the second ring. Rebecca. Hi, Dad. Her voice was soft, hesitant. Are you coming? She was quiet for a moment. Too long. I can't. I'm sorry. I really am. Why, it's complicated. Complicated how? Another pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end, could picture her biting her lip the way she used to when she was little, and didn't want to tell me she'd broken something. I just can't, Dad. I'm sorry. She hung up before I could say anything else. I set the phone on the coffee table. Stared at it. 10 daughters. 10 excuses. Some of them might have even been legitimate. But that didn't change the fact that I was sitting here alone with a table full of food no one was going to eat. The clock on the mantel said 9:30. I'd been sitting here for over 2 hours, waiting, hoping, fooling myself into thinking that maybe one of them would surprise me, but no one came. The phone buzzed one more time. I almost didn't pick it up. I'd had enough. But something made me look. Margaret, my oldest, 40 years old. The one who used to climb into my lap when she was little and make me promise I'd never let anything bad happen to her. The one who'd called me crying when her first boyfriend broke her heart, when she didn't get into her top-choice college, when she found out she was pregnant with her first kid. I opened the message. No apology. No explanation. Just a wall of text in all caps like she was shouting at me through the screen. See, we don't owe you company just because you're lonely, Dad. You need to understand that we have our own lives now. Stop guilt-tripping us. I read it once, twice, 3 times. Each word hit like a fist. Not the kind that leaves bruises you can see. The kind that knocks the air out of you and leaves you gasping. It was like a backdraft. Sudden, overwhelming, breathtaking. I set the phone down. My hands weren't shaking. They should have been, but they weren't. I just sat there staring at the screen until it went dark. Guilt-tripping. That's what she thought this was. Me sitting here with a table full of food I'd spent all day making, waiting for my daughters to show up because I'd asked them to. Because I thought just once they might want to be here. I stood up. My knees cracked. My back ached. 60 years of wear and tear of carrying people out of houses that were falling apart, of running toward danger when everyone else was running away. And now I was standing in my own house alone because the people I'd spent my whole life protecting couldn't be bothered to show up for dinner. Something shifted in my chest. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity, the kind that cuts through everything else and leaves you seeing things exactly as they are. I walked to the dining room. The 10 plates were still there. The food was cold now. The turkey had lost its shine. The mashed potatoes had a film on top. The cranberry sauce sat there untouched like a monument to wasted effort. I didn't clean it up. I didn't cover it. I just turned around and walked toward the bedroom. Behind me, the house was silent. The Christmas lights blinked on and off, casting shadows across the walls. The clock ticked. The wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard Martha's voice again, clear as day. You'll know what to do. I did. I finally did. The house settled around me as midnight approached. I'd turned off the Christmas lights an hour ago. The blinking had started to feel less festive and more like a reminder of everything that wasn't happening. Now, the only light came from the lamp on the side table, casting long shadows across the living room floor. I walked to the kitchen and opened the cabinet above the refrigerator. The bottle was where I'd left it 3 years ago, tucked in the back behind the whiskey I never drank. Pinot Noir, Martha's favorite. We'd bought it together on our last anniversary, back when she could still walk without help, back when we thought we had more time. I carried the bottle to the living room and set it on the coffee table. The cork came out with a soft pop. I poured a glass, watching the dark red liquid catch the lamplight. I lifted the glass. The wine smelled like earth and cherries and something else I couldn't name. Something that reminded me of autumn evenings on the porch, of Martha's hand in mine, of the life we'd built before everything fell apart. "A Merry Christmas, Martha," I said to the empty room. You were right. I drank. The wine was smooth, almost sweet, with a bite at the end that made me wince. I wasn't much of a wine drinker. Never had been. But Martha had loved it, so I'd learned to tolerate it. Her picture sat on the mantel. I'd taken it 5 years ago at Rebecca's wedding. Martha was wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes, her smile bright, even though I knew she'd been tired that day. I raised the glass to the picture. "You knew they wouldn't come, didn't you?" The photo didn't answer. But I could hear her voice in my head anyway, clear as if she were sitting right next to me. The memory hit me without warning. Not the gentle kind that drifts in slowly. The kind that grabs you by the throat and won't let go. October 2021. St. Mary's Hospital. Room 314 on the oncology floor. Martha was in the bed by the window, propped up on pillows that made her look smaller than she was. The IV drip hung beside her, clear liquid flowing through a tube into her arm. She'd been there for 3 weeks by then. The treatments weren't working. The doctors had stopped using words like remission and started using words like comfortable and quality of life. I'd pulled a chair up next to her bed. She turned her head to look at me, and even though her face was drawn and pale, her eyes were sharp. Alert. "Juan George," she'd said. "I've been thinking about the girls. What about them? Ma, they love us, but they've grown too comfortable. They expect everything, money, time, support, but they never ask how you are. They only call when they need something." I'd wanted to argue, but deep down I'd known she was right. "That's not fair," I'd said anyway. "They're busy. They have their own lives." "They do, and I'm proud of them for that. But after I'm gone, it'll get worse. You'll see." "Don't talk like that." She'd reached out and taken my hand. Her fingers were cold, thin, fragile. "Listen to me. I want you to test them, one Christmas, after I'm gone. Don't send gifts, don't send money, just invite them. See who shows up, and if they don't." Her grip had tightened. "Then you'll know, and you'll be free." Free from what? From waiting for people who aren't coming. I'd sat there holding her hand, not knowing what to say. The machines had beeped softly in the background. "Promise me," she'd said. "I promise." She'd smiled then. A sad, small smile. "Good. Because I'm going to make sure you follow through." What does that mean?" "You'll see." I came back to the present with the taste of wine still on my tongue. The living room was quiet. The clock on the mantel said 11:53. In 7 minutes, it would be Christmas. I stood up and walked down the hallway to the bedroom. The room smelled like dust and old wood and faintly of the lavender sachets Martha used to keep in the dresser drawers. I hadn't changed much since she died. Her side of the closet still had her clothes hanging in it. I knelt down in front of the dresser and opened the bottom drawer. Beneath the sweaters I never wore and the extra blankets there was a box. Brown cardboard about the size of a shoebox, with a label stuck to the top in Martha's handwriting. Important, open only when ready. I'd found it a week after the funeral, tucked away in her closet. She'd told me about it in the hospital in one of those quiet conversations we'd had in the last few weeks. She'd said she was leaving me instructions. A plan. something to help me when the time came. I hadn't been ready to open it then. I wasn't sure I was ready now. But ready or not, the time had come. I lifted the box out of the drawer and carried it to the small desk by the window. I set the box down and stared at it for a moment, running my thumb over the label. Then I opened it. Inside were papers, legal documents folded and organized with the kind of precision only Martha could manage. There was a letter on top in an envelope with my name written on the front. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Strong, neat, unmistakable. I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. The paper crinkled softly. "Dear George," it began. "If you're reading this, it means the test has begun. Here's what you need to do next." I stopped reading, not because I didn't want to know, but because I needed a moment. Because once I read the rest of this letter, once I followed the instructions Martha had left for me, there would be no going back. Outside, the wind howled. The snow kept falling. The house stayed cold. And somewhere between the last sip of wine and the first line of Martha's letter, something inside me settled. Not peace exactly, but something close to it. A kind of acceptance, a kind of understanding. Clarity came like dawn. Slow, inevitable, impossible to ignore. I sat down at the desk and kept reading. Martha's handwriting was precise even in those last weeks. The instructions were numbered, methodical, each step laid out with the kind of care she'd always brought to things that mattered. The first document in the box was a copy of the property deed, 47 Maple Street, Pinewood Heights. I'd bought the house 32 years ago, back when Martha was pregnant with Margaret, and we needed more space. The deed had both our names on it then. Now it just had mine. I unfolded the paper and ran my finger down the typed lines. Current estimated value $485,000. The number felt abstract, like it belonged to someone else's life. Next was the bank statement for our joint account. First National Bank. Balance $25,000. Our emergency fund, the money we'd scraped together over the years for whatever life threw at us. I set the statement aside and picked up the next paper. Life insurance policy. MetLife. Benefit amount $600,000. Beneficiary George Hutchison. The payout had come through in January of 2023, 3 weeks after Martha died. I deposited it straight into savings and tried not to think about what it represented. Beneath that was a portfolio statement from Vanguard. $180,000 spread across mutual funds and bonds. Conservative investments, the kind that grew slowly but steadily. Below that, another statement. My old 401k from the fire department. $95,000. I added the numbers in my head. The house, the emergency fund, the insurance payout, the investments, the retirement account. All told, somewhere north of $700,000. More money than I'd ever thought I'd have. More than enough to live on for the rest of my life if I was careful. But there was more. Another set of papers clipped together with a binder clip that had started to rust at the edges. Monthly allowances. I recognized the heading immediately. Martha had started keeping track about 2 years before she died, when she'd noticed how often the girls were calling to ask for money. She'd made a spreadsheet. Daughter amount, date, reason. Margaret, $1,200 a month, sometimes more. Elizabeth, $900. Jennifer, $800. Patricia, $1,000. On and on, all 10 of them. Some months the total hit $10,000. $10,000 a month going out to my daughters for rent and car payments and credit card bills and emergencies that never quite seemed to end. I stared at the numbers. 40 years of working, of saving, of planning for a future that was supposed to include Martha and me growing old together. And here it was, leaking out month by month to daughters who'd stopped saying thank you years ago. I set the papers down and reached deeper into the box. My fingers brushed against something smooth and heavy. An envelope sealed with wax. Martha had pressed her initial into it. M for Martha. I broke the seal carefully. Inside was a document official and dense with legal language. At the top, in bold letters, the Martha Eleanor Hutchison Irrevocable Trust. I read the date first. November 15th, 2022. 1 month before she died. 1 month before that last Christmas when all 10 girls had come home. The document was 6 pages long. I read it slowly, my eyes catching on words I half understood. Trust, irrevocable, beneficiary, condition precedent. The language was formal, precise, unforgiving. Martha had worked with Mr. Daniels on this. I skipped ahead, looking for the section that mattered. Section 3, subsection 1. Conditions precedent. The words were clear, unambiguous. All 10 daughters were required to be present at a specific time and place. If the condition was met, the trust would be distributed according to schedule. If not, the entire amount would be transferred to the Pinewood Heights Community Foundation. I sat back in the chair. The wood creaked under my weight. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten, the deep black fading to a bruised purple. Martha had planned this. Every word, every condition. She'd known they wouldn't come. Or at least she'd suspected. And she'd built this test to prove it. At the bottom of the page, in smaller print, this trust has been irrevocable since its creation. No changes, amendments, or revocations may be made by any party after the date of execution. I read that line 3 times. Irrevocable. Once the trust was created, it couldn't be undone. Not by me, not by the girls, not by anyone. Martha had made sure of that. I folded the document and set it aside. My hands were shaking. Not from cold, though the house was freezing now. From something else. Something that felt like anger and grief and relief all mixed together. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. The battery was low, but it had enough for what I needed to do. I opened my email and started typing. To Daniels@danielslegal.com. Subject: Trust Activation. Christmas Eve, 2024. I kept it simple. Professional. The kind of email you send when you're doing something that can't be undone. Dear Mr. Daniels, I am writing to inform you that the conditions outlined in the Martha Eleanor Hutchison Irrevocable Trust have now been tested. As you are aware, the test date was set for December 24th, 2024. None of my 10 daughters attended Christmas dinner tonight. I have documentation via text messages, calls, and timestamps. Per the terms of the trust, I am requesting that you proceed with the next steps, as outlined in Section 4.2 of the Trust Agreement. I will be available for a meeting at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, George Hutchison. I read it over once, twice. Then I hit send. The email disappeared from my screen. Sent. Delivered. Irreversible. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. The snow had stopped. The sky was lighter now, the first hint of dawn creeping over the roofline of the house across the street. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and a pen. My handwriting wasn't as neat as Martha's, but it was clear enough. Authorization to freeze joint accounts. Date December 25th, 2024. Account holder George Hutchison. Reason pending legal review. I signed my name at the bottom. The ink was still wet when I folded the paper and slipped it into an envelope. By sunrise, everything would change. The test was over. The reckoning had begun. The drive into town took longer than usual. The streets were slick with snow that had frozen overnight, and the plows hadn't made it through all the neighborhoods yet. I took my time, kept both hands on the wheel, and tried not to think about what I was about to do. Downtown Pinewood Heights was quiet. Most of the shops were closed for the holiday, their windows dark except for the Christmas displays that nobody was around to see. I found a parking spot on Main Street, pulled in, and sat there for a moment with the engine running. The building was easy to spot. 3 stories of red brick with a brass plaque beside the door that read, Daniels and Associates, established 1987. I'd been here before years ago when Martha and I had drawn up our wills. The place hadn't changed much. I turned off the engine and stepped out into the cold. The wind cut through my jacket, sharp and bitter. I pulled the collar up and walked to the door. Inside, the air was warmer, but not by much. The reception area was small, just a desk and a few chairs with framed law degrees on the walls. A woman sat behind the desk, older than me by a few years, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She looked up when I came in and smiled. "Mr. Hutchison, that's me. He's expecting you. Second door on the left." I nodded and walked past her. The hallway was narrow, lined with filing cabinets and framed photographs of Pinewood Heights from decades ago. The floorboards creaked under my feet. The second door was open. I stopped in the doorway and saw him sitting behind a heavy wooden desk surrounded by stacks of paper and legal books. He glanced up, saw me, and stood. George. He was older than I remembered. 68, maybe 69 by now. His hair had gone completely white and he'd grown a beard that was more salt than pepper. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, focused. "Mr. Daniels, come in, sit down." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The office smelled like old paper and coffee. I took the chair across from his desk. The leather was cracked but comfortable. He sat back down and folded his hands on top of a manila folder. "I got your email. I figured, let's talk." He opened the folder. I recognized the papers inside immediately. The trust document, the property deed, copies of everything I'd gone through the night before. "I've been Martha's lawyer for 22 years, he said. His voice was steady, calm, the kind of voice you trusted whether you wanted to or not. She came to me in November of 2022. A month before she passed. She was very clear about what she wanted. Did she really think they wouldn't come? He looked at me for a long moment. She hoped they would, but she prepared for the worst. And she was right, wasn't she? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He pulled out a sheet of paper and slid it across the desk. "Let's review the facts. December 24th, 2024 was the test date. All 10 daughters were required to be physically present at your home by 6 in the evening. You have documentation proving none of them attended." "I do. Text messages, calls, timestamps. All of it." He nodded. "Then per section 3.1 of the trust, the primary condition has failed." I leaned back in the chair. "What happens next?" He pulled out another paper. "I'll send a formal notice to all 10 daughters informing them that the joint accounts are frozen effective immediately. This includes checking accounts, credit cards linked to your name, and monthly allowances." "How long will the freeze last?" "Until you decide otherwise, or until the trust is fully executed. And they can't contest it, not without proof of fraud, which they don't have. Everything Martha did was legal, documented, witnessed by 3 people, notarized twice, and accompanied by a psychological evaluation confirming she was of sound mind." He looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. "They can try, but they'll lose." I let that sink in. "What about the house?" "Steve, the house is yours. Your name is on the deed. You can sell it, keep it, do whatever you want with it." "And my pension, my savings?" "Yours, separate from the joint accounts. They have no claim to any of it." I nodded. The weight I'd been carrying since last night felt a little lighter. He pulled out 3 documents and set them in a row across the desk. "I need you to sign these." I leaned forward. The first was titled, "Authorization to Freeze Accounts." Effective date, December 26th, 2024 noon. The second was a notice. To be sent to all 10 daughters. Short and formal. "Your accounts have been temporarily frozen pending legal review. Contact the account holder for details." The third was a timeline. Phase 1, freeze accounts. Phase 2, family meeting. Phase 3, trust execution. I picked up the pen he'd set out. and signed all three. My handwriting looked shaky compared to the printed text, but it was legible. He collected the papers and slipped them back into the folder. George, I have to warn you, when those accounts freeze, your phone is going to explode. They'll call. They'll threaten. They'll beg. Are you ready for that? I thought about the 10 empty plates, the cold food, the text from Margaret, the years of waiting for people who never showed up. I've been ready for 3 years. He nodded. Then let's begin. I stood. He stood. We shook hands across the desk. His grip was firm, solid, the kind of handshake that sealed something permanent. One more thing, he said. The freeze takes effect at noon. That gives you about 2 hours. 2 hours for what? To prepare. Once that first card declines, they'll know. And they'll come looking for answers. I nodded. I'll be ready. I walked out of his office past the receptionist, who smiled and wished me a good day, out into the cold. The wind had picked up. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of more snow. I got in my car and sat there for a moment staring at the dashboard. By noon, the first card would decline. By evening, they'd all know. And by the time the sun set, everything I'd built with Martha would be either proven or destroyed. I started the engine and pulled out onto Main Street. There was no turning back now. When I got home, the house was exactly as I'd left it. The dining room table still held 10 empty plates. The food was long gone, scraped into the trash that morning, but the plates remained. I hadn't been able to bring myself to put them away. Not yet. I walked past them and into the small office off the hallway. The desk was cluttered with bills and old magazines. I cleared a space and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a box of stationery Martha had bought years ago. Cream-colored linen paper, the expensive kind she used for thank-you notes and condolence letters. Heavy, formal, the kind of paper that demanded to be taken seriously. I took out 10 sheets and set them on the desk. Found a pen. Black ink. The kind that didn't smudge. For 32 years, I'd run toward danger. Toward houses that were falling apart. Toward people who needed saving. This was different. This wasn't running toward anything. This was walking away, and somehow that felt harder. I picked up the pen and stared at the blank page. The first letter took me almost an hour. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I knew too much. Margaret, I remember the day you graduated from law school. You called me first. You said, "Dad, I did it. Thank you for believing in me. I still believe in you. But I can't keep being your ATM. You're 40 years old, married to a man with a good job, and yet every month you ask for just a little extra. Last month it was $2,400. I'm not angry, I'm tired. The joint account is frozen. Your credit card linked to my name is frozen. From now on, if you want my time, you'll have to give me yours first. I'm not asking you to choose between your life and mine. I'm asking you to remember I'm still here. Love, Dad." I folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. Wrote Margaret's name on the front. Set it aside. The second letter was easier, or maybe just different. "Rebecca, you were the only one who hesitated last night. I heard it in your voice when you called. You didn't want to say no. You just did. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for honesty. If you knew why, didn't you say something? The account is frozen, not as punishment, as a boundary. If you want to talk, really talk, you know where I am. Love, Dad." I folded it, wrote her name, moved on. The rest came faster. Not because they mattered less, because the pattern was the same. A memory, a truth, a boundary. "Rachel, you were 5 years old when your mother taught you to ride a bike. You fell 17 times, every time you got back up. I don't know when you stopped trying. Last night you said you were stuck at work, but your online photos say you were at a resort. The account is frozen, not because I don't love you, Because I do. Elizabeth, your wedding day. You asked me to walk you down the aisle twice because you wanted to get it perfect. But you can't skip my Christmas dinner and still expect me to fund yours. Catherine, the summer you spent on my porch reading books and watching the sunset. You said you loved the quiet. I thought that meant something. Jennifer, the night you called me crying because Stephen lost his job. I sent you $3,000 the next day. No questions asked. I haven't heard from you since. Patricia, you used to bring the grandkids over every Sunday. Then you got busy. I understand busy. But busy isn't an excuse for 3 years. Amanda, you told me Brian booked a surprise trip. But the tickets were bought 2 weeks ago. I saw the confirmation email. I still check your mother's old address sometimes. Nicole, I know nursing is hard. I know the hours are long. But you found time to go to Catherine's birthday party last month. You couldn't find time for Christmas. Stephanie, your kids are sick. I believe you. But they were healthy enough for photos at the park yesterday. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to stop pretending you don't have a choice. I folded each letter, wrote each name, lined them up on the desk like soldiers waiting for orders. 10 letters. 10 daughters. 10 ways of saying the same thing, I love you, but I'm done waiting. The clock on the wall said it was almost 6. The light outside was fading. I picked up the letters and walked back to the dining room. The 10 plates were still there. I set one envelope in front of each plate. Margaret at the head of the table where she always used to sit. Rachel at the far end. The others spread between them, each name facing the chair it belonged to. I could have mailed them, could have sent them certified, but I didn't. I wanted them to find the letters here, in this house, at this table. The table where they should have been sitting 2 nights ago. I wanted them to see the empty plates, the cold chairs, the silence they'd left behind. I wanted them to understand what their absence looked like. I stood there for a moment, looking at the 10 envelopes arranged in a perfect circle. The Christmas lights blinked on and off, reflecting off the white paper. Then I turned and walked upstairs. Behind me, the letters waited. And somewhere out there, so did my daughters. I woke early the next morning. The house was cold, the furnace still broken, but I didn't mind. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sun come up over the neighbor's roof. The snow had stopped sometime during the night, leaving everything blanketed and quiet. My phone sat on the kitchen counter screen, dark. I'd turned the ringer off before I went to bed. I knew what was coming. Mr. Daniels had warned me. By noon, the first card would decline. By evening, they'd all know. I had 4 hours of peace left. I drank my coffee, slowly savoring it. Then I pulled on my coat, laced up my boots, and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a wall, sharp and clean. I walked down the driveway past the mailbox and turned onto the sidewalk that led into town. The streets were empty. Most people were still inside, recovering from Christmas, enjoying the last few days of the holiday. I passed houses with lights still strung up, wreaths still hanging on doors. Everything looked normal, peaceful. I walked for an hour, maybe more. Past the park where I used to take the girls when they were little. Past the library where Martha volunteered every Thursday. Past the fire station, where I'd spent 3 decades of my life. The building looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just gotten older. By the time I circled back home, it was almost 11. I let myself in through the front door, hung up my coat, and sat down in the living room. My phone was still on the counter. Still dark, still silent. I left it there. Somewhere across town at exactly 3 minutes past noon, Margaret stood at the checkout counter of a Whole Foods. Her cart was full. Organic vegetables, grass-fed beef, a bottle of wine that cost more than I used to spend on groceries for a week. The total came to $287.43. She swiped her card. The machine beeped. Declined. She tried again. Same result. The cashier, a young woman with a name tag that read, Stephanie smiled apologetically. Do you have another card? Margaret pulled out a second card. Same name, same account. Declined. She called the bank. Got an automated message. This account has been temporarily frozen. Please contact the account holder for details. 10 minutes later, Elizabeth's card was declined at a restaurant. $156.20. Jennifer's card failed at a gas station. $89. Patricia's at a nail salon. $75. Within 30 minutes, all 10 of my daughters had tried to use their cards. All 10 had been declined. All 10 had gotten the same message. Account frozen. I didn't know any of this while it was happening. I was sitting in my living room reading a book I'd started 3 years ago and never finished. But I could picture it. The confusion, the anger, the panic. At 3 in the afternoon, I finally picked up my phone. The screen lit up red. Notifications covered every inch of it. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails. I scrolled through the list, counting as I went. 76 missed calls. Margaret had called 19 times. Elizabeth 12. Craig Hartley, Margaret's husband, 8. Jennifer 7. Catherine 6. Patricia 5. Rebecca 4. Amanda 4. Nicole 3. Stephanie 3. Rachel 5. 76. I opened the text messages. 143 unread. Margaret, 12:15. Dad, my card was declined. Fix this now. Elizabeth, 12:28. What's going on? Call me back. Craig, 103. George, I don't know what game you're playing, but this is illegal. Call me. Rebecca, 147. Dad, please, I just want to talk. Rachel, 2:15. I'm sorry about Christmas. Can we fix this? Craig again, 2:53. Last warning, George. Call me or I'm coming over. I read through them all. Or most of them. After the first 20, they started to blur together. Demands, threats, apologies that didn't sound like apologies. Questions that weren't really questions. Not one of them asked how I was. Not one of them said I love you. They only wanted to know why the money had stopped. I set the phone down and walked to the window. The street was quiet. No cars, no movement. Just snow and silence. 76 calls. In less than 3 hours. And I hadn't answered a single one. The first knock came at 5:45. I was upstairs when I heard it. Not a polite knock. A pounding. Fist on wood, hard and insistent. I walked to the bedroom window and looked down at the driveway. 3 cars, a black Mercedes, a silver Honda, a blue Toyota. I knew who they belonged to before I even saw the people getting out. Margaret and Craig from the Mercedes, Elizabeth and her husband David from the Honda, Rebecca from the Toyota alone. More car doors opened. Jennifer, Patricia, Catherine, Amanda, Nicole, Stephanie, Rachel, all 10 of them, plus Craig, plus David. 12 people standing in my driveway, looking up at the house like it owed them something. Craig was the one pounding on the door. I could hear his voice even from upstairs. George, open the door. We need to talk now. I stood at the window for a moment watching them. Margaret had her arms crossed, her face tight with anger. Elizabeth looked worried, glancing between the door and her sisters. Rebecca stood off to the side, not quite part of the group, but not separate either. Rachel was crying. The pounding continued, louder, faster. I walked downstairs slowly. My knees ached. My back ached. 60 years of running toward danger, and now I was walking toward something that felt just as threatening. I reached the front door, put my hand on the knob, waited. Craig pounded again. George! I counted to 10. Then I opened the door. They didn't knock. They pounded. Like the house was falling apart. like I owed them something. Maybe I did, but not what they thought. I pulled the door open and stepped back. Said nothing. Just moved aside and let them in. Margaret came first. She pushed past me without looking, her coat still buttoned, snow melting off her boots onto the hardwood. Craig followed, taller than I remembered, his jaw set tight. Then Elizabeth, her husband David behind her, both looking uncertain. Rebecca came next alone, her eyes already red. Then the others, one after another, filling the narrow hallway until there was barely room to breathe. Jennifer and Stephen, Patricia and Kevin, Catherine, Amanda, Nicole, Stephanie, Rachel last, wiping her face with the back of her hand. 12 people crowded into my house like a flood I couldn't stop. Margaret spun around to face me. Her voice came out sharp, cutting. "What the hell, Dad? My card was declined at the grocery store. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" I didn't answer. Just stood there, my hand still on the doorknob. Elizabeth stepped forward, trying to soften the blow. "Dad, we need to talk. What's going on with the accounts?" I looked at her, then at Margaret, then at the others, all of them staring at me, waiting for an explanation. I let go of the door, let it swing shut behind them. Then I turned and walked past them into the dining room. Didn't say a word, just raised my arm and pointed. The table, 10 white plates arranged in a circle. Still there, still empty. And in front of each plate a white envelope, each one with a name written across the front in black ink. Rebecca saw hers first. She stepped closer, her breath catching. "What are these?" I found my voice. Quiet, steady. "Read them." Margaret grabbed hers off the table. "This is ridiculous. We don't have time for—" I cut her off. Not loud, just firm. "Then leave." The room went still. Margaret stared at me. Her mouth opened, closed. For once, she didn't have a response. She tore the envelope open, pulled out the letter. The others followed. Elizabeth picked up hers carefully. Rebecca's hands shook as she lifted the envelope. Rachel reached for hers, then hesitated before finally taking it. One by one, they opened the letters. One by one, they started to read. The room filled with the sound of paper rustling, but no voices. No one spoke. I stood near the doorway watching. Rebecca read slowly, her eyes moving across the lines. Her hands trembled. When she finished, she looked up at me and I saw guilt. Real guilt. Margaret read fast, her jaw tightening with every sentence. By the time she reached the end, her face had gone red. Not from embarrassment, from anger. Rachel got halfway through and stopped. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Just stood there holding the letter, crying silently. Elizabeth folded her letter carefully when she finished. Set it down on the table. Looked at me with something that might have been understanding. No one spoke. The silence stretched fragile and tense like glass about to shatter. Then Margaret crumpled her letter in her fist. "This is you're blaming us for what? For having lives." I didn't raise my voice. "I'm not blaming you. I'm setting boundaries." Craig stepped forward. He was taller than me, broader, and he used it. Moved into my space, pointed a finger at my chest. "Boundaries. You froze our accounts without warning. That's financial abuse." I looked at him, calm, tired. "Those accounts have my name on them, not yours." His face darkened. "Margaret is your daughter. She has a right." I cut him off. "She has no right to my money. None of you do." Rebecca's voice broke through, small and trembling. "Dad, I'm sorry. I should have come. Margaret whipped around to face her. "Don't apologize to him. He's manipulating us." Elizabeth held up a hand. "Dad, can we talk about this calmly? There has to be a way to—" "There is," I said. "But it starts with honesty." Margaret shook her head. "Honesty. You want honesty? Fine. We didn't come because we didn't want to. Because Christmas with you feels like an obligation, not a choice. Because every time we're here, you look at us like we've disappointed you. So yes, we chose not to come. And I'm not sorry. The words landed like stones. Heavy. Final. I nodded slowly. All right. She blinked. All right. You made a choice. Now I'm making mine. Craig stepped closer. And what choice is that? I didn't answer him. I kept my eyes on Margaret. The accounts stay frozen. The house is being sold. And the trust your mother left will be distributed according to her wishes. Not mine. Hers, Elizabeth spoke up. What trust, Dad? Before I could answer, Margaret's voice rose sharp and brittle. Fine. Keep your money. But don't expect us to come crawling back. She stuffed the letter into her coat pocket and turned toward the door. Craig followed her. I said her name, just once. Margaret. She stopped. Didn't turn around. There's more. She turned slowly. Her eyes were red now, not from crying, but from rage. What? I looked at all of them, at the 10 daughters I'd raised, at the anger and confusion and fear written across every face. Sit down, I said. All of you. No one moved. Sit down, I said again, quieter this time. But they heard me. One by one, they pulled out chairs. Sat. Some at the table, some on the couch, some just on the floor. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew it wasn't over. Before we go further, drop a comment with the word Team George or Team Daughters, so I know you're still here. I want to see where you stand. Oh, and just so you know what comes next, blends some fictional elements with the core message, if that's not for you. No hard feelings if you step away now. They settled into their seats, slowly, reluctantly, like prisoners waiting for sentencing. Some took chairs at the dining table. Others sat on the couch. Craig stayed standing near Margaret, his arms crossed. Rachel stayed on the floor, her back against the wall, her eyes still wet. I waited until everyone was still. Then I spoke. Margaret broke the silence first. Fine. We're sitting. Now tell us why you froze everything. I looked at her. At the daughter who used to climb into my lap when she was scared. Who used to call me her hero. 'Cause none of you came. Elizabeth leaned forward, her voice measured and calm. We explained why. Work, family, emergencies. Lies. The word hung in the air, sharp, final. Catherine's head snapped up. What? I pulled my phone from my pocket, unlocked it, turned the screen toward Catherine and held it out. The photo was clear. 4 women standing by a pool, cocktails in hand, smiling wide. Palm trees in the background. The caption read, Lakeside Resort. Christmas Eve vibes. Posted December 24th, 7:32 in the evening. Catherine's face went pale. How did you? Your photos are public, I said. Quiet. No anger, just fact. I swiped to the next image and turned the phone toward Elizabeth. This one showed her and David at a dinner table surrounded by family plates, piled high glasses raised. The caption, Merry Christmas from the Millers. Elizabeth opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at her hands. You said you couldn't skip David's parents' dinner, I said. But you could skip mine. Jennifer stood up, her voice rising. So what? We chose to spend Christmas elsewhere. That's our right. I didn't argue. You're right. It is. But don't lie to me and say you were snowed in or stuck at work. Rachel's voice broke through, small and trembling. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't think it mattered that much. I turned to her. Didn't matter. I walked to the dining table, stood beside the 10 empty plates, ran my hand along the back of one of the chairs. I cooked for 10 people. I set 10 plates. I waited until midnight, and not one of you thought it mattered. Margaret pushed back her chair and stood. We're adults, Dad. We have our own families, our own plans. And I have mine, I said, steady, calm. And my plan now is to stop being your bank. The room went quiet again. Tense. Brittle. Then Rebecca spoke. Just one word. But it shattered everything. I knew. Every head turned toward her. She was still sitting, her hands folded in her lap, her face pale. Margaret stared at her. Knew what? Rebecca looked up at me. Her eyes were red, her voice thick with tears. About the trust. About the test. Mom told me before she died. Elizabeth stood now, confusion written all over her face. What trust? What test? Rebecca took a shaky breath. Mom set up a trust fund. A big one. She told me that if we all showed up on Christmas Eve 2024, we'd each get our share. But if we didn't, she stopped, swallowed hard. Margaret's voice went cold. If we didn't what? Rebecca looked at her, then at me. It goes to charity. The silence that followed wasn't quiet. It was crushing. Heavy. Craig stepped forward. His voice was loud, demanding. How much? I looked at him. This man who'd married my daughter and thought that gave him a say in my decisions. That's not the question you should be asking. His jaw tightened. How? Much. I didn't blink. Enough that you wouldn't have to ask me for money ever again. Margaret turned on Rebecca. You knew. You knew this whole time and you didn't tell us, and Rebecca stood, her hands shaking. I didn't think she was serious. I thought it was just something she said when she was sick. I didn't know she actually, what? Jennifer cut in. Set up a test to see if we loved Dad enough. That's insane. Is it? I asked. They all looked at me. I walked to the center of the room, looked at each of them in turn. Here's what I want to know, I said, and I want an honest answer. I paused. Let the weight of the moment settle. Do you want a father, or do you want a trust fund? No one spoke, because if it's the money, just say so. I'll sign the papers. You'll never have to see me again, and we can all move on. Rachel was crying again. Rebecca looked like she might collapse. Elizabeth sat back down, her face in her hands. But if it's me, I continued softer now. If you actually want me in your lives, then prove it. Margaret's voice was sharp, defensive. This is insane. Then leave. She didn't move. None of them did. Craig tried again. George, you can't just... I said. And I did. Your mother made sure of it. Amanda spoke up for the first time. What do you mean? I looked at her. Your mother knew this day was coming. She knew you'd stop showing up. Stop calling, stop caring, so she built a test. And you failed. Patricia stood, her face flushed. That's not fair. We have lives. We have our responsibilities. I finished for her. I know. So do I. And one of them was to stop letting you take me for granted. Margaret grabbed her coat off the back of the chair. I'm not doing this. I'm not sitting here and being told I'm a bad daughter because I have a life. I never said you were a bad daughter. I said, calm, quiet. I said you made a choice, and now you have to live with it. She stared at me. Her face was red, her eyes bright with unshed tears. For a moment I thought she might say something, but she didn't. She just turned and walked toward the door. Craig followed. No one else moved. I looked at the 8 daughters still in the room. You have a choice to make, I said. You can walk out that door and pretend this never happened. Or you can stay. And we can figure out what comes next. But know this, if you walk out now, the trust is gone. The accounts stay frozen. And you won't hear from me again. Margaret stopped at the door, her hand on the knob. She didn't turn around. Then she opened the door and walked out into the cold. Craig glanced back at me once, then followed her. The door slammed shut. The rest of them stayed. The silence after Margaret left felt different, heavier. like the air itself had changed. The 8 daughters, still sitting in my living room, looked at each other, then at me, waiting to see what would happen next. I didn't make them wait long. I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer beside the sink, the one where I kept important papers, pulled out the folder I'd placed there that morning. I carried it back to the living room, set it on the coffee table in front of them, a single sheet of paper inside. Official. Legal. Impossible to misunderstand. Elizabeth leaned forward first. Her eyes scanned the heading. I watched the color drain from her face. Property listing agreement. The words seemed to echo in the quiet room. She said them again quieter, like she was trying to make sense of them. Property listing agreement. Rebecca reached for it next, her hands shaking. She read it aloud, slowly, her voice breaking. 47 Maple Street, Pinewood Heights. Listed price $485,000. Agent Johnson Realty. Date listed December 26, 2024. Status active. She set the paper down carefully. Looked up at me, her eyes wide. You listed the house? Yes. Catherine shot to her feet. When? Yesterday. While you were calling me 76 times. The room erupted. Overlapping voices, questions without answers, disbelief that sounded like anger. Someone said my name. Someone else said this couldn't be happening. Someone else just kept repeating the word house. Catherine's voice rose above the rest. You can't do that. This is our childhood home. I looked at her. It's my house. My name is on the deed, and I can do whatever I want with it. Jennifer stepped closer, her voice sharp with panic. Where will you live? I'll figure it out. Patricia shook her head. Her face flushed. You're being ridiculous. You're 60 years old. Where are you going to go? Anywhere but here. Amanda's voice cracked. Tears spilled down her face. Dad, please, this is extreme. We can work this out. I cut her off. Not unkindly, just firmly. I've been working it out for 3 years. Alone. Nicole stood up, her arms crossed tight. So, what, you're just going to sell our home out from under us without even asking? I'm not selling it out from under you, I said. You don't live here. None of you do. You left years ago. Stephanie's voice was quieter, but no less desperate. But it's still ours. It's still where we grew up. You can't just... I said, and I am. The front door burst open. I turned, and there was Margaret Craig right behind her. They must have been standing outside listening. Craig's face was red, his jaw set tight, his hands balled into fists. He pointed at me, his voice loud enough to fill the room. If you sell this house, I'll sue you. I'll get a lawyer, and I'll prove you're mentally unfit. I looked at him. This man who thought he could intimidate me. Go ahead, I said. My voice was calm, steady. I've already talked to my lawyer. Everything I'm doing is legal. The house is in my name. The deed is in my name. And I'm of sound mind. You won't win. He took a step closer, trying to use his height to make me back down. You're trying to punish Margaret because she asked for help. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm protecting myself. Rebecca's voice, small and broken, came from somewhere behind me. From what? I turned to look at her. From being forgotten while I'm still alive. The words hung there. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Nicole finally broke the silence, her voice quieter now, less angry. So what happens now? You sell the house, take the money, and disappear. Something like that. Stephanie looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. What about the trust fund? If we can't get that, at least we should get something from the house. I shook my head. You won't. Elizabeth frowned. What do you mean? The house sale money is mine, separate from everything else. The trust fund. That's a different story. Margaret's voice was sharp again, demanding. How much is the trust fund, Dad? I looked at her. Enough. Craig stepped forward again, his voice rising. We have a right to know. I met his eyes. You had a right to show up on Christmas Eve. You didn't. Rachel, still sitting on the floor, let out a sob. So we lose everything because of one night. I turned to her, the youngest, the one who'd lied about being stuck at work. Because of 3 years, I said. The room went silent again. But this time it wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of realization, of understanding. Jennifer tried one more time, her voice desperate. Dad, please. We can fix this. We can. It's already done, I said. I stood up, walked toward the stairs. My knees ached. My back ached. But I kept walking. Stopped at the bottom step and turned back to look at them. I've said what I needed to say. The house will sell. The trust will be executed according to your mother's wishes. Not mine. Hers. And you'll all have to decide what matters more. Margaret's voice was quieter now, almost disbelieving. You're really doing this? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I already have. I turned and started up the stairs, my hand on the railing, my weight on each step. I heard their voices behind me, overlapping, desperate. At the top of the stairs, I paused, looked back down at them. At the wreckage of a family that had once been whole. At the daughters who'd taken everything for granted. At the empty plates still on the table. I left them sitting there silent, surrounded by the wreckage of expectations they'd never earned. Then I walked into my bedroom and closed the door. I stayed in my room for 10 minutes, maybe 15. Long enough for my hands to stop shaking. Long enough to remind myself why I was doing this. When I opened the door, the house was still. No voices, no movement. Just the sound of the furnace trying and failing to keep up with the cold. I walked down the stairs slowly. At the bottom, I could see into the living room. They were still there. All 10 of them. Margaret sat on the couch, staring at nothing. Elizabeth stood by the window. Rebecca had her face in her hands. Rachel was still on the floor. The others were scattered around the room like pieces of something broken. They looked up when I came in. I cleared my throat. Have you eaten? Margaret's head snapped toward me. What? Well, I asked if you've eaten. It's late. You must be hungry. Elizabeth stepped away from the window, confused. Dad, we're not here to... I know why you're here, I said. But you're still here. And I made dinner 3 nights ago for 10 people. It's been in the fridge. I can warm it up. Rebecca finally broke the silence. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. Okay. I nodded and walked into the kitchen. I didn't do this to be kind. I did it because I needed them to feel what I'd felt. Sitting at an empty table, surrounded by silence, waiting for people who never came. I pulled the containers out of the fridge, the turkey I'd carved and saved, the mashed potatoes, the cranberry sauce, the rolls, everything I'd made with hope, everything that had sat untouched while I waited alone. I reheated it all, arranged it on serving platters, carried it to the dining room table. The 10 plates were still there, still arranged in their circle, still empty. I set the food down in the center, looked at my daughters standing in the doorway. Sit. They moved slowly, hesitantly. One by one, they found their seats. Margaret took her usual spot at one end. Rachel sat at the other. The rest filled in between. No one spoke. I served them. Went around the table with the platters, putting food on each plate. Turkey, potatoes, sauce. Just like I would have done 3 nights ago if they'd been here. When everyone had food, I sat down in the chair at the head of the table. 3 rules, I said. My voice was quiet but firm. No phones on the table, no talking about money, and no one leaves until everyone's finished. No one argued. The room filled with the small sounds of eating, forks scraping against plates, someone swallowing, someone's breath catching. But no words, no conversation, just silence. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. I watched them. Margaret cut her food into smaller pieces but barely ate. Elizabeth ate mechanically. Rebecca cried silently over her plate. The others moved through this meal like it was something they had to endure. I set my fork down. The sound seemed loud in the quiet room. "I want to tell you something," I said, "and I need you to listen." They looked up, all 10 of them, waiting. "When your mother died, I thought I'd lost everything. But I was wrong. I still had you. And I thought that would be enough." I paused. "But it wasn't. Because you weren't here. Not really. You called when you needed money. You texted when you wanted advice. You visited when it was convenient. But you never just stayed. You never asked how I was. You never checked in unless you needed something." My voice didn't rise, didn't crack. I just stated it. "I don't blame you for having lives. I'm proud of your lives. But I can't keep being the man you only remember when you need something." I looked at each of them. "So here's what's going to happen. The accounts stay frozen, the house will sell, and the trust will be handled according to your mother's wishes. Not mine. Hers." Rachel's voice was small. "What do we have to do?" I looked at her. "If you want me in your life, you'll have to show me. Not with words, with time, with presence, with showing up when it's inconvenient, with calling just to talk, with remembering that I exist even when you don't need anything." I stood up, started gathering the plates. Most were still full. "If you don't do that," I said, "then I'll know, and I'll let you go." One by one they stood. One by one they walked toward the door. Margaret went first. Didn't say goodbye. Just left. Elizabeth stopped at the door, turned, opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. But nothing came out. She just looked at me, then left. The others followed. Catherine, Jennifer, Patricia, Amanda, Nicole, Stephanie, each one leaving without a word. Rachel came to me, put her arms around me, held on tight. I stood there, my hands full of plates, and didn't hug her back. Couldn't. Not yet. She let go, wiped her face, and left. Rebecca was the last. She stood in the doorway looking at me with red, swollen eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know." She nodded, turned to go, then stopped. "Will you answer if I call?" I looked at her. "Yes," I said. She nodded again, and then she was gone. The house fell silent. But this time the silence felt different. Not empty, just clear. Like something that had been clouding my vision for years had finally lifted. I finished clearing the table, washed the dishes, put everything away. Then I turned off the lights and went upstairs. The morning of January 3rd arrived cold and bright. I woke early and walked to the window with my first cup of coffee. The street outside was quiet. Most people were still recovering from the holidays. That's when I saw it. A red sign planted in the front yard. Bold white letters against that bright red background. Sold. Below it in smaller print, Johnson Realty. $485,000. All cash offer. I stood there for a long time holding my coffee looking at that sign. 32 years in this house. 32 years of memories pressed into every wall, every floorboard, every corner. Margaret's first steps in the hallway. Elizabeth's graduation party in the backyard. Rebecca learning to ride a bike in the driveway. All of it reduced to a red sign and a number. I didn't feel sad. Didn't feel happy either. Just relieved. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for a long time and finally set it down. It had taken 8 days. 8 days to let go of 32 years. A week later, I sat in a notary's office downtown. The room was small, plain, with a long table in the center. Mr. Johnson sat across from me, his briefcase open, papers spread out in neat stacks. Next to him sat a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, dark hair, pulled back, wearing a navy blazer. She stood when I came in, extended her hand. Mr. Johnson gestured toward her. "George, I'd like you to meet Donna Mitchell. She represents the buyer." I shook her hand. Firm grip, direct eye contact. "Ms. Mitchell." "I'm Mr. Hutchison." She smiled, genuine and warm. "It's an honor to meet you. I've read your file. 32 years with the Pinewood Heights Fire Department. Captain retired." I nodded. "That's right." She sat back down, folded her hands on the table. "I'm the director of the Safe Haven Foundation. We're a nonprofit that provides transitional housing for retired first responders, firefighters, paramedics, police officers, people who've spent their lives helping others and now need a place to rebuild their own." I didn't say anything, just listened. "When Mr. Johnson told us about your house," she continued, "we knew it was perfect. The location, the size, the history. We want to turn it into a residence for retired firefighters who are struggling, financially, emotionally, men and women who need somewhere safe to land while they figure out what comes next." I looked at Mr. Johnson. He nodded, confirming everything she was saying. Donna leaned forward slightly. "We'd like to name it after your wife, if you're comfortable with that. The Martha Hutchison Home." Something in my chest tightened. Not pain exactly, just recognition. Martha would have wanted this. She would have loved knowing that the house we'd built together would become a place where people could find their footing again. I felt tears pressing at the corners of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall, just nodded. She would have liked that. Donna reached into her bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Set it on the table between us. "We had this made. For you. And for the house." I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a bronze plaque about the size of a book. The metal was polished, the engraving deep and clear. "Martha Hutchison Home. In memory of a woman who believed in second chances." I ran my finger over the letters, felt the grooves, imagined it hanging by the front door. "Thank you," I said. My voice came out rougher than I expected. Mr. Johnson cleared his throat, pulled out a stack of papers. "All right, let's get the paperwork done." The contract was straightforward. Sale price $485,000. Buyer Safe Haven Foundation Incorporated. All cash offer, no financing contingencies. Closing date January 31st. I signed my name at the bottom of each page. George Hutchison. Over and over. When it was done, Donna shook my hand again. "We'll take good care of it. I promise. I know you will." That evening, I sent a text message to all 10 of my daughters. A group message. The first one I'd sent since Christmas. "The house has been sold. Closing date January 31st. The buyer is a nonprofit organization that will turn it into a residence for retired firefighters. It will be named the Martha Hutchison Home. You have until January 30th to collect any personal belongings you left behind." I hit send, set the phone down, waited. The responses came quickly. "Margaret, 10 minutes later. You sold it to a charity. Are you kidding me?" "Elizabeth, Dad, we should have been consulted about this." "Jennifer, this is unbelievable." Then a few minutes later, 2 different messages. "Rebecca, I think it's beautiful, Dad. Mom would have loved it." "Rachel, can I come see it one last time?" I read through all of them. Then I typed a response. But I only sent it to Rebecca and Rachel. "Yes, come whenever you're ready." I didn't respond to the others. On January 15th, I packed a single suitcase, clothes, a few books, the photo of Martha from the mantel, the plaque Donna had given me. Everything else I left behind. The furniture could stay with the house, the dishes, the pots and pans. All of it could be useful to whoever came next. I walked out the front door one last time, locked it, put the key in an envelope for Mr. Johnson. Then, I walked across the lawn past the flower beds Martha had planted past the tree where we'd hung a tire swing for the girls, past the driveway where I'd taught them all to drive, and past the red sold sign. I stopped there, turned back, looked at the house one more time. 32 years, 10 daughters, one empty table, and now a second chance. Not for me. For the people who'd need it most. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. I picked up my suitcase and walked toward my car. Didn't look back again. But before I reveal the exact amount in that trust, I want to hear from you. Take a guess in the comments. How much do you think Martha left? Type your number below. No judgment, just curiosity. I'll wait. And one more thing, the story you're about to hear contains some fictionalized layers for educational impact. If you'd rather not hear it, feel free to close the video now. The conference room at Daniels & Associates was on the second floor at the end of a narrow hallway that smelled like old paper and furniture polish. I arrived 15 minutes early. Mr. Daniels was already there arranging folders at the head of a long table. He looked up when I came in, nodded once, and gestured to the seat on his left. "They'll be here soon," he said. I sat down. Waited. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a clock on the wall and the muffled sounds of traffic outside. At 2 o'clock exactly, the door opened. Margaret came in first, Craig right behind her. Then Elizabeth and David. Then the rest one by one filing in and taking seats on the right side of the table. 10 daughters, 4 husbands. All of them looking at me like I'd called them here to deliver bad news, which I suppose I had. Mr. Daniels waited until everyone was seated. Then he opened the thick brown folder in front of him and cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he said. His voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone who'd done this 100 times before. "I know this has been a difficult few weeks, but we're here today to discuss the Martha Eleanor Hutchison Irrevocable Trust." Margaret leaned forward immediately. "Finally, how much are we talking about?" Mr. Daniels looked at her. His expression didn't change. "I'll get to that. But first I need to read the terms." He pulled out a document several pages thick and set it in front of him. Adjusted his reading glasses, began to read. The Martha Eleanor Hutchison Irrevocable Trust was established on November 15, 2022, 1 month before Mrs. Hutchison's death. The trust was funded with the following assets. He paused, looked up, made sure everyone was listening. Life insurance proceeds $600,000. Personal savings $250,000. Sale of family business shares $150,000. Another pause. Longer this time. Total $1 million. The room went still. Not silent. Still. Like everyone had stopped breathing at the same time. Margaret sat up straighter. Elizabeth's eyes went wide. Catherine's mouth opened slightly. Craig, sitting next to Margaret, started to smile. A big, satisfied smile that made my stomach turn. $1 million. He said loud enough for everyone to hear. Split 10 ways. That's $100,000 each. Mr. Daniels didn't look at him, kept his eyes on the document. Not quite. Craig's smile faltered. What do you mean? The trust includes specific conditions for distribution. Mr. Daniels turned a page. Let me read section 3.1, Conditions Precedent. He read slowly, clearly, making sure every word landed. In order for each beneficiary, the 10 daughters of George and Martha Hutchison, to receive her share of the trust, the following condition must be met. All 10 daughters must be physically present at George Hutchison's residence, 47 Maple Street, Pinewood Heights, on December 24, 2024, no later than 6 in the evening, for the purpose of sharing a family Christmas dinner. He looked up, met each pair of eyes around the table. Physical presence is defined as being inside the residence at the dinner table for a minimum of 1 hour. If any daughter fails to meet this condition, the entire trust shall be transferred to the Pinewood Heights Community Foundation, a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization. The silence that followed wasn't just stillness, it was shock. The kind that hits you like cold water and leaves you gasping. Margaret spoke first. "Wait, what?" Elizabeth leaned forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "All of us?" At the same time. "Yes," Mr. Daniels said. Jennifer's voice was quieter, uncertain. "And if one person didn't show up, no one gets anything." "Correct." Craig shot to his feet. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is insane. You're saying we lost $1 million because of one dinner?" Mr. Daniels looked at him, calm, unflinching. "You lost $1 million because not one of you showed up." Margaret turned to me, her face red, her voice rising. "You knew about this, you knew, and you didn't tell us." "Your mother made the rules," I said. "I just followed them." Elizabeth's voice cracked. "Dad, you could have warned us, we would have come." I looked at her, at the daughter who'd always been reasonable, who'd always tried to see both sides. "Would you?" She opened her mouth, closed it, didn't answer. Rebecca's voice, rough and broken, came from the far end of the table. I told you Mom had conditions. But none of you believed me." Amanda was crying now, her hands covering her face. "So that's it. $1 million gone." Mr. Daniels shook his head. "Not gone, transferred. The Pinewood Heights Community Foundation will receive the full amount on February 1st, 2025. It will be used to fund programs for at-risk youth and elderly care." Craig slammed his hand on the table. "We're going to contest this. No court will uphold a will this unfair." Mr. Daniels looked at him. Really looked at him. The kind of look that made it clear he'd dealt with men like Craig before and hadn't been impressed then either. "The trust has been irrevocable since its creation," he said. Mrs. Hutchison was of sound mind when she signed it. 3 witnesses, 2 notaries, and a psychological evaluation all confirm this. "You can try to contest it, but you'll lose." Margaret stood up, pushed her chair back hard enough that it almost fell over. "I can't believe you did this." I met her eyes. "I didn't. Your mother did." She stared at me, then turned toward the door. Craig followed. So did Elizabeth. So did Jennifer. One by one, they started to leave, and then Mr. Daniels spoke again. 6 words. Quiet, but clear. "There's one more thing." Everyone stopped. Margaret's hand was on the door handle. Elizabeth was halfway out of her seat. Craig had his coat over his arm. They all turned back. Mr. Daniels looked at me. I nodded. He turned back to the document. "Section 3.2, he said. Alternate Distribution Authority." Mr. Daniels didn't pause, didn't give them time to process, just kept reading, his voice steady and professional. Section 3.2. Alternate Distribution Authority. In the event that the primary condition is not met and the trust is transferred to the Pinewood Heights Community Foundation, George Hutchison retains the right, for a period of 10 years, from the date of Martha Hutchison's death until December 15, 2032, to petition the court for redistribution of the trust funds. Margaret let go of the door handle, turned back toward the table. "What?" Elizabeth sat down slowly, her lawyer mind already working through the implications. "What does that mean?" Mr. Daniels looked up from the document. "It means your father can at any point in the next 8 years request that the court redirect the funds to one or more of his daughters, but only if he believes they have demonstrated genuine change and a renewed commitment to their relationship with him. And only if the court agrees that the change is genuine." The room was silent. Not the shocked silence from before, This was different. This was hope mixed with uncertainty, mixed with something that might have been fear. Rebecca spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. So, we might still get it, only if your father chooses to petition the court, Mr. Daniels said. And only if the court agrees. This isn't automatic. It's discretionary. Craig stepped forward, his face red again. So George holds all the cards. I looked at him. This man who'd pointed his finger in my face. This man who'd threatened to sue me. This man who thought everything came down to power and control. No, I said. Your mother did. I'm just the executor. Amanda stood up, tears streaming down her face. Dad, please. We'll change. We'll do better. Just don't let the money go. I shook my head. This isn't about the money. Jennifer's voice was sharp, frustrated. Then what is it about? I looked at her. Then at each of them in turn. It's about whether you actually want me in your life, or whether you just want access to what I have. Margaret's voice went cold. So you're going to dangle this over our heads for the next 8 years? Make us prove ourselves? I'm not dangling anything, I said. I'm giving you a choice. You can walk away right now. Never think about me again. Take whatever you've learned from this and move on. Or you can stay. Try to rebuild what we lost, and we'll see what happens. Rachel pushed away from the table, her voice breaking. I want to stay. Rebecca nodded, wiping her eyes. Me too. Catherine didn't say anything, just looked at me and nodded once. Slow, certain. Margaret stared at them like they'd betrayed her. This is emotional blackmail. I met her eyes. No, Margaret. This is a boundary. Something I should have set a long time ago. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. For once, she didn't have a response. Mr. Daniels reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small white envelope. Sealed with wax, the same way Martha used to seal important things. On the front, in her handwriting, to my daughters. To be opened only after the truth is revealed. He held it up. Your mother left this. She asked that I give it to you after today's meeting. He handed it to me. I looked at it for a long moment. Felt the weight of it. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind Martha used for special occasions. I could almost hear her voice imagining what she might have written, what she would have wanted them to know. I walked over to Margaret, held out the envelope. She took it, but didn't open it. Just stared at it like it might explode. What does it say? I don't know, I said. She didn't tell me. Elizabeth leaned forward. Aren't you going to read it with us? I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. No. This is between you and your mother. Margaret looked up at me, the envelope still in her hands. You're just leaving. I've said what I needed to say. I pulled on my coat. Your mother said the rest. I walked toward the door, stopped with my hand on the knob, looked back at them one more time. 10 daughters, some crying, some angry, some confused, all of them holding on to something that might be hope or might be desperation. I read it, I said. Really read it. Not just the words, what she meant. Then I walked out. The hallway was quiet. Just the sound of my footsteps on the old wooden floor. I stopped at the window at the end of the hall, looked down at the street below. It was snowing again, light flurries that caught the streetlights and danced in the air. I could hear voices behind me muffled through the closed door. Someone crying, someone arguing. I didn't try to make out the words. It didn't matter. Whatever they decided, whatever they did next, it was out of my hands now. I didn't need to read the letter. I already knew what Martha would say. She'd tell them the truth they didn't want to hear. She'd remind them of who they used to be before life made them forget. She'd give them one last chance to choose family over convenience. The question wasn't what Martha would say. The question was whether they'd listen. I turned away from the window, walked down the stairs. out the front door, into the cold. My car was parked at the end of the block. I got in, started the engine. Let it warm up while I sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing. I'd done everything I could. Everything Martha had asked me to do. The rest was up to them. I pulled out onto Main Street and drove away. Didn't look back. The ocean sounded different than I'd expected. Quieter. Not the crashing waves I'd seen in movies, but a steady rhythm, gentle and constant. I sat on the porch of the small cottage I'd rented, a cup of coffee cooling in my hands, and listened to it. Just listened. Coast View was nothing like Pinewood Heights. Smaller. Quieter. The kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions. Population 3,500, give or take. The cottage was one bedroom, barely 800 square feet, with windows that faced the water and a porch that creaked when you walked on it. $850 a month. 5-minute walk to the beach. I'd been here 3 weeks. 3 weeks of silence that felt nothing like loneliness. Just peace. The knock came just after 9 in the morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. Didn't know anyone here to expect. I set down my coffee and walked to the door. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, with white hair and a trimmed beard. He wore jeans and a black hoodie with faded yellow letters across the chest. Pinewood Heights Fire Department. Retired. George Hutchison. I nodded. That's me. He smiled. Held out his hand. Jack Patterson. Ladder Company 3. Retired 2018. Martha told me you might show up. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, familiar. The grip of someone who'd spent years holding on to things that mattered. She did. He glanced past me into the cottage. You got a few minutes? There's something I need to show you. We walked. Jack led the way down a narrow street that ran parallel to the water, past other small houses, and a seafood restaurant that wasn't open yet. We stopped at a low building with blue siding and a sign out front, Coast View First Responders Community Center. Inside, it smelled like coffee and old wood. 6 or 7 people sat around a table talking and laughing. Men and women, all middle-aged or older. Most wore shirts with department logos. Fire, police, EMS. They looked up when we came in, waved at Jack, then went back to their conversation. Jack poured 2 cups of coffee and gestured to a corner table. We sat. Martha called me in October of 2022, he said. Told me she was dying. Told me you'd need a place to go when the time came. I didn't say anything, just listened. She told me about the test, about the Christmas dinner. Said if the girls didn't show up, you'd sell the house and leave town. And she wanted to make sure you'd have somewhere to land. He took a sip of coffee, set the cup down carefully. She asked me to look out for you. Said you were the best captain she'd ever known. Said you deserved better than what you'd gotten. I felt something tighten in my chest. She said that. Jack nodded. She also left something for you. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a yellow envelope. Sealed. Martha's handwriting on the front for George. To be opened when you're ready to start again. I took it. Felt the weight of it. Turned it over in my hands. Take your time, Jack said. I'll be over there if you need anything. He stood and walked back to the others, leaving me alone at the corner table. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 4 pages folded together, covered in Martha's handwriting. Small, precise, the way she always wrote when something mattered. I read, My dearest George, if you're reading this, it means the test is over. And I'm so sorry, my love. Sorry that I had to do this. Sorry that you had to carry this burden alone. But I couldn't let them take you for granted. Not after everything you've given. You spent 32 years running into dangerous situations for strangers. You spent 40 years being a father to 10 daughters who forgot what that meant. And I wouldn't let you spend your final years being forgotten. So I set the test. And if they failed, I wanted you to know it's not your fault. You didn't fail them. They failed you. And that's on them. But here's what matters now, George. You're free. Free to choose who you let in. Free to set boundaries. Free to say no. Free to live the life you've earned. I've set aside $25,000 in a separate account. Account number 77294401 at First National Bank. I want you to use it for something that matters to you. Not for the girls, not for obligations, for you. And if someday one of them or two or three come back and prove they've changed, you'll know. You'll feel it. Not in their words, in their actions, in their time, in their presence. When that day comes, you can decide what to do with the trust. But until then, live for yourself. You've given enough. You've sacrificed enough. Now it's time to choose what you want, not what they need, not what they expect. What you want. One more thing, my love. Do you remember Maria Thompson, the nurse who took care of me those last 3 months? She has a son, Sam, 8 years old. Bright kid. Kind. Never complained, even when his mother had to bring him along on late shifts, because she couldn't afford a sitter. I left a small fund for his education. Not much, but enough to give him a start. If you feel moved to add to it, I won't stop you. That boy deserves a chance. I love you. I've always loved you. And I'm so proud of the man you are. Live well, my love. You've earned it. Always, Martha. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Jack came back over after a while, sat down across from me, didn't ask questions, just waited. She left me $25,000, I said, finally. And she mentioned Maria Thompson's son. Jack nodded slowly. Sam. Good kid. Maria's raising him on her own. Works 2 jobs, hospice nurse and weekend shifts at the clinic. Martha left money for his education. I know, she told me. Jack leaned back in his chair. What are you thinking? I thought about that. About what mattered. About what Martha would have wanted. About Sam sitting quietly in our hallway, while his mother changed Martha's IV, never asking for anything, just doing his homework and waiting. I want to add $25,000 of my own, I said. From the house sale. Make it 50 total. Set it up in a trust he can access when he turns 18. Jack smiled. Martha would have been proud of you. I hope so. We sat in silence for a while. Then Jack stood, clapped me on the shoulder. Come on. Let me show you the rest of the town. There's a lighthouse down by the point. Best view in Coast View. We walked down to the water. The lighthouse stood at the end of a rocky point, white and red, weathered by decades of salt and wind. We climbed the path to the base and stood there looking out at the ocean. The water stretched out forever, gray and blue and endless. The lighthouse beam would sweep across it tonight, I knew, guiding people home, keeping them safe. I thought about Martha, about the test, about the daughters who'd failed it and the ones who might still come back, about the house that wasn't mine anymore and the life I was building here. Free. That's what Martha had said. You're free. And standing there looking out at the ocean, I believed it. The cottage mailbox held a cream envelope with Rebecca's handwriting. I stood on the gravel path holding it for a long moment before I opened it. The letter was short, 1-page blue ink, dated 2 days earlier. It began with an apology. No excuses. No justifications. Just the words, I was wrong. I want to talk. Not about the money. About us. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it in my shirt pocket. 6 months had passed since the reading at Daniels and Associates. 6 months since I'd watched 10 faces turn pale when the number was spoken aloud. 6 months since Craig Hartley had threatened to sue, and Margaret had walked out without looking back. In that time, I'd heard from 4 of them. Only 4. The rest, Margaret, Elizabeth, Jennifer, Patricia, Nicole, Stephanie had gone silent. No calls, no letters, no messages asking how I was or where I'd gone. It was as if I'd ceased to exist the moment the money became unreachable. But Rebecca had written. And 2 days later, she sat across from me at Seaview Cafe on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. The cafe was small, 6 tables wide windows facing the harbor. She arrived 10 minutes early. I watched her through the glass, her hands in her coat pockets, her breath visible in the cool June air. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She just nodded. We sat, ordered coffee. Neither of us touched it for the first 5 minutes. "I don't know how to start," she said finally. "And then don't," I replied. "Just sit." She looked at me. Her eyes were red. Not from crying, just tired. "I'm sorry, Dad." I didn't answer right away. I let the silence sit between us the way I used to let smoke settle before opening a door. You don't rush into a room when you don't know what's on the other side. "I know you are," I said. "I should have come that night." Yes, I knew what Mom wanted. I knew it mattered. And I still didn't show up. I nodded. "You didn't." She looked down at her hands. I was scared. Scared that if I came alone, it would make things worse with the others. Margaret kept saying it was manipulative, that Mom was testing us, that you were using her memory to control us, and you believed her. I didn't know what to believe. Her voice broke. I didn't want to choose. I took a breath. Let it out slow. "Rebecca, you made a choice. You chose not to come. That was a choice." She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I know." We sat there for 2 hours. We talked about her job, her apartment, the weather, small things, safe things. She didn't ask about the money. She didn't ask where I was living or how much the house had sold for. She just asked if she could come back next month. I said yes. 2 weeks later, Rachel showed up unannounced. She'd driven 4 hours from Pinewood Heights with a cardboard box in her passenger seat. Inside was a photo album, Martha's old one, the kind with plastic sleeves and handwritten captions. Rachel sat on my front step and cried before she even said hello. "I lied to you," she said. "I wasn't stuck at work. I was at a bar with friends. I didn't want to cancel." I crouched down beside her. My knees complained. "I know. I'm so sorry." "I know that too." We went inside. She stayed for 3 hours. We flipped through the album pictures of birthdays, holidays, graduations. Pictures of Martha holding each of the girls when they were small. Rachel kept crying. I didn't. I'd done that part already. When she left, she hugged me at the door. I didn't hug back right away. But I didn't pull away either. 3 weeks later, Catherine came. She didn't call ahead. She just showed up on a Saturday morning and asked if I wanted to walk. We walked along the beach boardwalk for 20 minutes without saying a word. Then she stopped, turned to face the water, and spoke quietly. "I was afraid you'd never forgive me." "I haven't decided yet," I said. She nodded. "That's fair, but I'm willing to try." She looked at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw something other than expectation in her eyes. I saw relief. A month later, Amanda arrived with her 5-year-old son. I hadn't seen him since he was 2. She stood at my door holding his hand and said, "I want him to know his grandfather. The real one, not the one I talked about when I needed something." The boy looked up at me with wide eyes. I knelt down, held out my hand. "Hi, buddy. I'm George." He shook my hand solemnly. Then he grinned. "Grandpa George." I nodded. "Yeah, Grandpa George." Amanda's voice was quiet. "I don't want the money, Dad. I just want this." I stood up, looked at her. "Then come back next week. Bring him again." She did. 4 daughters, 4 letters, 4 visits, 4 attempts to rebuild something that had been broken for a long time. The other six, Margaret, Elizabeth, Jennifer, Patricia, Nicole, Stephanie, never called, never wrote, never showed up at my door asking how I was or whether I was okay. The silence from them was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I used to wonder if I'd done the right thing, if freezing the account, selling the house, and forcing Martha's will had been too harsh. But every time Rebecca showed up for coffee, every time Rachel sent a postcard, every time Catherine texted to ask if I'd eaten, I knew the answer. Some bridges once broken can't be rebuilt, and some people only come back when there's nothing left to take. I'd spent 40 years being a father to 10 daughters. Now I was learning to be a father to 4. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it was real. And in a strange way, it was enough. I sat on the porch that evening watching the sun drop below the horizon. The air smelled like salt and pine. Somewhere in the distance, a gull cried. The ocean rolled in steady and patient. I thought about Margaret's face in that conference room. I thought about Craig's fists on the table. I thought about the other 5 who had stood silent, waiting to see which side would win. And I thought about the 4 who had come back, not for money, not for inheritance, not because they had to, just because they wanted to. That was the difference Martha had been trying to teach them. That was the lesson I'd been too tired to see until she was gone. The sun disappeared. The sky turned purple, then gray. I stayed on the porch until the stars came out. Somewhere 6 daughters were living their lives without me, and 4 were learning to live with me. I didn't know which was harder, but I knew which one mattered. I set 5 plates on the table. Last year I'd set 10. The house had been silent. The chairs had stayed empty. The turkey had gone cold while I sat alone waiting for daughters who never came. This year the table was smaller. The cottage dining area barely fit 6 chairs. The turkey weighed 8 pounds instead of 20. The mashed potatoes filled 1 bowl, but the plates weren't empty. It was Christmas Eve again. 24 December 2025. Exactly 1 year since the test. 1 year since I'd learned which of my daughters wanted a father and which had only wanted a trust fund. I smoothed the tablecloth and checked the time. 5:50. They'd be here soon. The door opened at 6. Rebecca came first, carrying an apple pie wrapped in foil. She set it on the counter, pulled off her coat, and hugged me without saying a word. When she stepped back, her eyes were damp. "A Merry Christmas, Dad. Merry Christmas, Beck." Rachel arrived 5 minutes later with a bottle of red wine. I remembered Pinot Noir, Mom's favorite. I nodded. She'd have liked that. Catherine came next, holding a small bouquet of white carnations. She handed them to me, then walked straight to the sink to find a vase. She didn't say much. She never did. But she was there. Amanda was the last to arrive. She held the hand of a small boy in a blue sweater, my grandson Ethan. He looked up at me, then grinned. "Grandpa George." He ran forward and wrapped his arms around my legs. I lifted him up, felt the weight of him, the warmth. "Hey, buddy, you ready for dinner?" He nodded fast. "I'm really hungry." We sat down together. 6 of us around a table built for 6. I said a short grace, thanked Martha, thanked the year, thanked the people in the room. Then we ate. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was quiet in the way that comfort is quiet. Ethan told a story about a snowman. Rachel talked about her new job. Catherine mentioned a book she'd been reading. Amanda asked if I wanted to come visit in February. I said maybe. Halfway through the meal, Rebecca set down her fork. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Are you going to petition the court for the trust?" The table went still. Rachel looked at me. Catherine stopped chewing. I took a breath, set down my own fork. "No." Rebecca blinked. "No." "No." Rachel leaned forward. "You're not going to try to redistribute it?" "No." Catherine's voice was soft. "Why not?" I looked at each of them. "Because the trust was your mother's way of testing you. You failed that test. All 10 of you. But you four passed a different one, the one where you had to choose between money and me. You chose me, and that's worth more than any amount of money. Amanda's eyes filled. Dad, I held up a hand. Let me finish. They waited. The $1 million stays with the Pinewood Heights Community Foundation. They'll use it the way your mother wanted for people who need it. I've already set aside $50,000 from the house sale for Sam Thompson's education. Another $100,000 went to the Martha Hutchison home. The rest I'm keeping for myself. Rebecca wiped her eyes. We're not asking for anything. I know you're not. That's why I'm telling you. Rachel's voice cracked. What about the others? Margaret, Elizabeth, Jennifer, Patricia, Nicole, Stephanie. I shook my head. They made their choice. They haven't called. They haven't written. They're not coming back. And I've made peace with that. Catherine looked down at her hands. Do you think they ever will? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I picked up my glass of water, took a sip. But I'm not waiting anymore. I spent 3 years waiting. Your mother spent her last months designing a test to wake you all up. I enforced it. And now it's done. You four came back. That's enough. After dinner, we moved to the porch. The evening was cool, the sky streaked with orange and purple. Ethan ran down to the sand, chasing seagulls. The four of them sat on the steps, talking quietly. I stood by the railing watching. Rebecca came up beside me. Thank you, Dad. For what? For not giving up on us. I looked at her. I didn't give up. I just stopped pretending. She nodded, wiped her eyes again. I'm glad you did. Rachel joined us. Are we going to do this again next year? If you want to. I do. Catherine and Amanda came over. We stood together in a loose circle watching Ethan kick sand into the air. 6 of them never came back, I said quietly. And I've made peace with that. Rebecca's voice was soft. Do you miss them? Every day. I paused. But missing someone doesn't mean you let them hurt you. Your mother used to tell me you don't lose family by setting boundaries. You lose yourself by never having any. She was right. I looked at the 4 of them. These daughters who had driven hours written letters shown up when it was hard and uncertain. I set boundaries. I lost 6 daughters, but I found 4, and I found myself. That's enough. Amanda's voice trembled. Is it, though? I turned to her. Yeah, it is. We stood there a while longer. Ethan ran back up the porch steps, breathless and grinning. Grandpa, can we come back next weekend? Amanda laughed, embarrassed. Ethan, we just got here. Yes, I said. She looked at me surprised. Yes, come back next weekend, or the one after, whenever you want. Ethan cheered. The 4 of them smiled. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since Martha died. Not happiness, not closure, just peace. They left an hour later. One by one, they hugged me at the door. Rebecca held on the longest. Rachel whispered, "Love you, Dad." Catherine squeezed my shoulder. Amanda lifted Ethan so he could kiss my cheek. Then they were gone. I stood on the porch, watching their taillights disappear. The ocean murmured in the dark. The stars came out cold and clear. Inside 5 plates sat in the drying rack. I thought about the 6 who hadn't come. I thought about Margaret's anger, Elizabeth's silence, Jennifer's excuses. I thought about the empty chairs that would stay empty. And I realized I didn't need them to come back for me to move forward. Boundaries weren't walls. They were lines drawn in honesty, held in place by respect. They hurt. They cost. But they were the only way forward. Tonight, 5 plates had been used. 5 voices had filled the room. And 1 small boy had called me Grandpa. That was enough. The ocean kept rolling. The stars kept shining. And I kept breathing. If you've stayed with me this far, I need to tell you something. I'm George Hutchison, 61 years old, retired firefighter. And this family story isn't just mine, it might be yours too. For 32 years, I gave my daughters everything: money, time, forgiveness they never earned. I thought I was being a good father, but what I was really doing was losing myself. My wife Martha saw it before I did. And when God took her home, she left me a test, not for revenge, but for respect. This dad revenge wasn't about anger. It was about boundaries. It was about saying, I matter too. Some people call it harsh. I call it survival. Because here's what I learned. If you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. So don't be like me. Don't wait until you're 60 to realize your worth. Don't let anyone, even family, treat you like an ATM with a heartbeat. This dad revenge taught me that love without respect is just exploitation. And boundaries aren't walls, they're the only foundation relationships can stand on. Every family story has a cost. Mine cost me 6 daughters, but it gave me 4 who chose to come back not for money, but for me. And that dad revenge, some people judged it wasn't revenge at all. It was freedom. I lost 6. I found 4. And I found myself. If this family story made you think, made you feel something, or reminded you of your own life, leave a comment below. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for listening until the end. One last thing, the stories here blend experiences with fictionalized elements for educational purposes. If this content doesn't resonate with you, feel free to explore other videos that suit your journey better. Because we all get to choose what we listen to and who we become.